Tonight, Katana says the words epic fail. Harley Quinn talks about how her teammates have a foot fetish, and Alfred blows the Joker's head off with a shotgun. Literally only one of those things didn't actually happen. All that and more tonight on the Not So New 52. Hello everyone and welcome to episode 76 of the Not So New 52. I am your host and happy Valentine's Day. I mean tomorrow as of this going up, but it may as well be today because if you have not yet bought your significant other a present, you are out of time. So go ahead and break out the arts and crafts kits and hope that they don't mind it. DC, luckily, has already given its gift to me because this week there was only 11 comics to cover. Oh, thank you DC, it's all I've ever wanted. I mean, in fairness, one of them is the end of Death of the Family, which takes like double as long to talk about than any other issue, but, you know, it's the thought that counts. So speaking of which, let's go through the comics that are coming out this week. February 13th, 2013 has the number 17 issues of Batman, Batman and Robin, Batgirl, Superboy, Deathstroke, Suicide Squad, and Demon Knights, as well as the number 9 issue of the Ravagers, the number 5 issue of Team 7, the number 2 issue of Threshold, and the all-new number 1 issue of Katana. For when I began this show, I was able to just go down the line and say, hey, here's all the issue number 1s, and I didn't even have to say all those different numbers. But as I progress, it's getting very confusing to try to keep track of which ones are issue 17, which ones are issue 9s and 5s and 1s and 2s. It's a hassle, but you're not here to hear about that. You're here to hear about a bunch of stories that I'm talking about. So in terms of events, we have Batman being the finale of Death of the Family, as mentioned before. Superboy is the continuation of Hell on Earth. And Katana is written by Nocenti, which is an event all by itself, isn't it? Oh boy. Anyway, I've wasted enough time trying to fill this episode to be a normal length, so let's just go ahead and jump right into it with the finale of Death of the Family. Batman number 17, written by Scott Snyder, art by Greg Capullo. This is, of course, the final part of Death of the Family, and we open up this issue with a skeleton bat flying towards Batman while Joker's basically just taunting him like it's flying at us, POV, and it's just saying like, oh, it's coming, it's gonna get you, and Batman's like, what are you doing, Joker? And all of a sudden the lights come up and we see that the skeleton bat was just being puppeted by Joker. But more importantly, the entire Bat family is sat around a dinner table. The little two-headed lion cub is there, and everyone has bags over their head with serving trays in front of them. And Joker's like, all right, who's ready for dinner? Dinner's served. And Batman immediately just tells Joker, like, I'm going to get out of this in 6 seconds. I'm going to break every bone in your body. And Joker reveals, of course, he had contingencies. Turns out everybody is doused in gasoline, and underneath Batman's chair is some flint. So if he tries to move, it'll spark up and cause everybody to burst into flames. So he has to just kind of sit there and take it for right now. But then Joker's like, hey, weren't you asking me about Alfred before? Don't you want to know what happened to Alfred? And Batman's like, yes, please tell me what happened to Alfred. And Alfred comes out from a little side catacomb because they're in the caves underneath the Bat Cave, I guess. Like, this isn't actually the Bat Cave proper. But Alfred comes out and he's Jokerized. And Batman's like, oh, okay, well, I'm happy you're alive, but it's kind of rough that you're Jokerized. And Joker tells Alfred to pull the rope, which takes off the hoods over everyone's heads. And it turns out everyone in the Bat family is completely bandaged up across their entire faces, and it looks like they're very bloody bandages. And Joker's like, well, you know, took me some time, but I got it done. And he takes off the lids to the serving trays to reveal that all of their faces are on ice being served to them. And we get this horrifying image of Joker saying how, I hope you like it, I made it with love. So this is where we get back into the whole, why is Joker doing this sort of thing? And he's like, yeah, I took off their faces because it was so easy. Like, underneath is just muscle and sinew and grossness, but underneath my face is just a bigger smile, and underneath your face, Batman, I'm sure is just more Batman. And Joker lays into him. He's like, okay, here I got a question for you. Why won't you kill me? Why do you not do that? And he's like, because if I do that, you'll win. He's like, yeah, okay, but that's stupid. Like, that is actually dumb. Like, if I'm dead, I'm dead. I wouldn't win, I'd be dead. The real reason you don't kill me is because you like me. You like having me around. I make you feel something. I am what gives you purpose. The rest of the family members here, they're the ones who take that away. They make you so you don't want to be Batman. You want to be able to spend your life just hanging out with them. So, yeah, that's the whole thing here. And Batman does also say here that he doesn't know who Joker is. He says there's never been any DNA evidence. And Joker's like, yeah, all right, whatever. So at that point, Joker pulls out his little black book that he's had this whole time that apparently has all the identities of all the Robins in it. And he's like, Batman's the one who wrote this for me. And not like literally, it's metaphorically. Of every time he let me go or any of his rogues gallery go, he was just signing the death warrant because he was always going to keep going until the family died, until there was another dead Robin, or until the villains just got one up on him one too many times. It was always going to go that way. So Joker basically says, all right, this is it. Let's just get it over with, pull off the Band-Aid quick. And he lights a match and says, I'll do it or you can do it. Up to you, but we all know that you want to do it. And Batman then gets up from his chair, causing the entire family to get set ablaze, and he immediately breaks out of his stuff. And he's like, Joker, you should have realized I know these caves better than anyone. And he fires a grenade up into the roof, which turns out to be a water reservoir of some sort, and it immediately extinguishes the fire over everybody. And Joker's like, crap, all right, that's not funny. So he immediately starts running off. Batman unwraps Damian, takes the bandages off his face, and Damian's like, is it bad? I can't feel my face. What's going on, Dad? And turns out Joker just lied. All their faces are still intact. It was all just a ruse. So he unwraps everybody else and says, like, okay, we got to keep Alfred restrained because he's been Jokerized, but other than that, we can take him back to the cave. And Nightwing's like, dude, no, go get Joker. Like, he's still in the cave. Just go get him. And he's saying, like, no, I'm not going to leave you guys. I'm not going to let Joker possibly do something more. He's like, no, we're fine. Go. And Batman looks at his family and is just like, all right. So he takes off. Meanwhile, the family, as they're getting unwrapped, look at that weird little two-headed lion cub, and all of a sudden, its smaller head starts blinking, and turns out that Joker put in a Joker gas bomb inside of it, so they immediately all just become Jokerized and start attacking each other. So Batman chases after Joker. He somehow has an axe, and he starts trying to hatchet Batman, and Batman is just not having it. Like, Joker's trying to be like, oh, you just had to go and ruin my party, and Batman's like, shut up, we're not doing this, we are done. And he's like, oh, okay, you want to do this fisticuffs then? And he's like, no, we're not doing anything. I am done with you, Joker. I am done with all of this. And we keep on cutting back to the family fighting each other, and Joker reveals, like, yes, well, you better get done with me quick then, Batman, because you'll have to get back to your family, if they're even still alive. And Batman's like, no, stop. I'm not letting you talk anymore. I'm not letting you, like, taunt me anymore. This is it. We're done. My family is what makes me stronger. You, I'm done with you. And Joker kind of takes that personally. He squirts some acid in Batman's face and tries to run off, but then he comes to a giant waterfall within one of the caves, nearly falls off, but then Batman grabs him, and he's like, no. You don't get to die by accident. What happens here tonight to you happens because of me. And he basically says, you know what, Joker, you're right. I do want to end this, so let's take this further than we've ever gone. I know who you are. And Joker's like, no, you don't. You're lying. And he's like, no. You were gone for a whole year. And I finally figured it out in between that time. I know exactly what your name is. And he's like, okay, yeah, stop bluffing. Tell me. And we see in the middle of this, Alfred, despite being Jokerized, manages to get in the middle of the family fighting and calms them down so they stop fighting. And so Batman leans into Joker's ear. He's like, no, I'm going to say it. I'm going to say your real name. Your real name is... And Joker does not want to hear it. He shocks Batman and then falls off the waterfall, seemingly to his death, with his face floating away otherwise. And at that point, Batman takes off his cowl. He goes and finds Joker's little black book that fell out during the fight. And he sees it was always blank. There was nothing ever there. So Joker never knew their identities. So some time passed, at least tonight. We see Alfred is in bed rest, and Batman's like, hey, I'm going to be taking care of you. Here's a little bell. Ring it if you want some food or a drink or a real drink. And Alfred's like, oh, no, you are not being my butler. And he's like, nope, you're going to rest up. Also, the family's going to be here soon, so going to have to see them. But then, one by one, he gets a text from Barbara and from Tim and from Jason and from Damian, basically all saying, like, hey, they're not going to make it. So... Bruce explains to Alfred, like, the reason I knew that he didn't know who we are is that I know he's not interested. Way back when they first brought Dick into the family, Bruce went as Bruce to Arkham Asylum, and he went up to Joker's cell and held up the Joker card that he left in the Batcave that one night and said, I think this belongs to you. And Joker looked at him and just didn't care. He did not even recognize that it was Batman. He didn't want to know because that would be the end of the game. So at that point, Bruce gets a call from Dick, who, after everyone else canceled, he's like, don't worry, I get it. You know, you got other stuff going on. And he's like, all right. Turns out Dick's actually right outside. He was totally willing to come in, but he's being turned away. And Bruce basically asks him, like, okay, did Joker say anything to you guys when you were all in the dark? And he's like, no, he didn't say anything. We didn't even know it was there until he started talking to you. So at that point, Bruce goes down to the Batcave. They were talking about there was some element in the Joker toxin that was still left over in their systems that Bruce had to investigate. And the system finally found the element that was missing, which was called dubnium, which apparently originally was not named dubnium. It was named hafnium. And so the ending image is just the letters HA as it slowly zooms in on a computer and a fly that is sitting on the screen. And that's it. That's Death of the Family. I mean, I like it. I think it's definitely a solid story in terms of Batman. I don't know if it needed as many tie-ins, you know? I know that's not the core story's fault, and that's probably editorial coming in saying, like, hey, we need everything in the Bat family to tie in to the Joker being back. And, like, I get it from a sales perspective, but from a storytelling perspective, it seems a lot better when you just slim it down to just the core Batman issues. The tie-ins really do kind of just say the same thing over and over again, you know? So I know that's not this issue's fault. I know it's probably not even Scott Snyder's fault, but it is something to take into account with the event as a whole. As for this particular issue, I mean, I don't know what I really would have wanted out of it. I think it did a good enough job of wrapping up the story that it's telling, but in the end, it didn't really feel like it made any shattering changes. The biggest thing here is that it seems that, you know, the Bat family is kind of taking a break from each other, which, okay, cool, I guess, but it doesn't really feel like that was justified. Like, the fact that he's like, no, Joker didn't know who any of you were. He literally got you all when you were in costume. Like, that's it. You were fine. You were, like, everything else was just in your head. So I feel like it would have held more weight if Joker actually did know who they were. I know that would have immediately have done irreconcilable differences with the rest of the universe, but I think that's the only way that I could justify the family disbanding, you know? But otherwise, art's great. I actually found that this is the one issue where I listened to what Joker was saying in his whole, oh, Batman, me and you, or something special, and, like, it actually seemed to be coherent rather than just the ramblings of a madman. So overall, I'm going to give this particular issue I'll give it a 7. It's it's fine, but it does take the brunt of here's the buildup of what we've been doing over the past several months, and it's just kind of not everything I wanted it to be, which is nowhere to blame but me, but either way, it's getting a 7. Superboy number 17, written by Tom DeFalco, art by R.B. Silva. This is the next part of Hell on Earth. Last issue, the Star Chamber thing started, and oh no, the world's going to end. This issue, the world's ending. So we see satellites are like blowing up, crazy sunspot activity, and apparently it's heating up the Earth at a rapid temperature. And it's all because the Star Chamber is draining energy from the sun, which would make you think it would get colder, but somehow, no. So at that point, we see the Justice League looking on. Dr. Veritas is in a hologram form. She does nothing, and she disappears in like 2 pages. I don't know why she's here, but anyway, basically, Superman's like, okay, so the only way to stop him is by taking down the Star Chamber. Let's go do that. And then Flash pops over the intercom being like, hey, I was zapped back to the Watchtower. Can I get Batman and Cyborg to help me deal with the fact that the Earth is ending? And Batman's like, yeah, no, that's cool. We're not going to be any use in a fight here anyway. And Cyborg should have been like, hey, I have a sonic cannon, but regardless, he's a telephone pole. So we're left with just Superboy, Superman, and Wonder Woman to take on the Star Chamber. And Superboy, being our narrator for this issue, was like, they're pretty sure of themselves. I'm kind of crapping my pants right now. So we see Hell and Supergirl basically just shaking each other's hands like, yes, we did a great job. It's all thanks to you. And she's like, no, it's all thanks to you, Hell. And he's like, well, I love you. I love you too. Anyway, at that point, Supergirl does make the point of like, hey, weather and the sun and all that are kind of going crazy right now. Are you sure everyone on this Earth is going to be fine? And he's like, I promise you, any discomfort they feel, they'll only feel it for a fleeting second. Anyway, I gotta go take care of something. And he teleports away right in front of Superman, Superboy, and Wonder Woman, and then just immediately like throws them away. And he's like, you know what? I'm done with you and Wonder Woman, Superman. You guys just piss off. I'm done with you. But then he goes up to Superboy being like, you, however, you are an abomination to nature, and you shouldn't be wearing the House of El armor. And he starts ripping it off of Superboy's body, and then just throws him away. And Superman's like, no, you're sick, Hell. No one deserves to be killed like that. And he charges at him, and Hell just waves his hand, being like, you suck so hard, Kal-El. You are literally the worst. I'm trying to save your planet, and this is what you're doing. All right, well, here's what's going to happen. I'm going to put your battle armor back on you, because it does rightfully belong to you, and then I'm going to kill you. And Wonder Woman tries to intervene, and Superman's like, no, go save Superboy. This is my own personal battle. And Wonder Woman's like, okay, well, good luck with that. So then we cut over to Superboy, who's been thrown into some weird ice cavern. And he's like, yeah, I'm not okay, but I use my telekinetic ability to repair my DNA, at least temporarily. And then I have to use all my focus to fly out of this ice cavern. And then the story stops. And we cut to this other thing going on where the Herald shows up in front of Superboy. And he's like, hey, I'm the Herald. I'm here for doomed planets. And Superboy's like, well, this planet's not doomed. We have Superman. And Herald's like, huh, okay, well, I guess I better go deal with that. And then he just teleports out. And Superboy's like, that was weird. Anyway, but then instead of following Superboy, we follow the Herald, who reappears in front of the giant space entity called Oracle. And Oracle apparently doesn't talk, but Herald can hear him. And he's like, yeah, so I went to Earth when Hell showed up there, and I blew my mighty horn. But now it seems like there may be okay because there are, quote, 5 anomalies on that world. So that's just a thing to look forward to. Anyway, back to Superboy. It turns out because of the Star Cannon thing and them going back in time, little miniature black holes are popping up everywhere. So Superboy has to dodge around those lest he dies. But as he's approaching it, Supergirl gets in the way, just being like, hey, stop trying to get in the way of us bringing back Krypton. And Superboy's like, okay, I'm going to say this quick so that you don't interrupt me. the sun is going to explode if you do this and everyone's going to die. And Supergirl just punches him, calls him a liar. And then for like 2.5 pages here, she just lays into him saying like, you're a clone, you're an abomination, you shouldn't exist and you're lying to me. And he's like, is it possible that hell is lying to you? And she's like, no, it's, I mean, probably not, but I can't deal with that cognitive dissonance, so I'm just going to keep on laying into you. And as she's about to lay the final blow on him, Wonder Woman comes up, punches her in the face, knocks her through a few mountains, and it looks like they're going to get into their own thing in Supergirl. But then we get one last page of Superboy. He's like, okay, I am now really, really not okay, even more so than before, but right now nobody's fighting me, so I'm just going to go do what I can in terms of the Star Chamber. So he flies his way up there and he's like, I'm going to make like a hero or die trying. And that's the issue. I think that's the last issue we're getting of Superboy in this event. I think we're wrapping it up pretty soon, so that's neat. I mean, I don't dislike it. It's just, okay, first off the Star Herald thing and Oracle. I know I must have missed something. Otherwise, this is the least set up thing I can possibly imagine. I know he's been popping up in other issues, specifically more so of Superboy, but like, it just feels like it's going to be a Deus Ex at the end of all this, where it's just the Oracle shows up and he sends hell to hell, and then we're done. And I hope that's not the case. Because it's really going to suck. Otherwise, I don't know what the Oracle's doing. I have genuinely no clue what's going on with that plot. And the fact that it's so sprinkled over everything, where it's not really intertwined, it's just there. And they keep cutting to it every once in a while. It bothers me. I want it to either tie in and be really important, or just stay out entirely. What they're doing is just bothering me. In terms of everything besides that, this was a fine enough issue. Supergirl, I feel bad for her character because I really don't see how they're going to manage to pull her out of this, where she's just 100% doing everything she can to make sure humanity dies. And I know that she's not aware that that's what's happening, but like, you're still complicit even if you're not. Like, it's still happening. People have now warned you it is happening and you are unquestioningly going with the plan. Like, it's going to be hard to pull the character back from that. As for Connor here, Superboy, he does a good enough job. He's a fine enough character. I think they still have yet to really earn that hero title, but it sounds like that's what they're going for, at least by the end of the arc. So, hey, maybe we'll get something. Overall, I'd say this is probably... It's probably like a 6.5. Yeah, 6.5 feels fine. 6 is a little too low, but it's close. It's a very low 6.5. I don't mind anything that really happened in this issue, but nothing's jumping out at me as like, wow, I'm so glad that we're doing this, you know? And there are some very bizarre choices made, but art-wise, it's good, and in general, the direction that this event is going is fine. Not great, but fine, and that gets it a 6.5. Katana #1, written by Nocenti, art by Alixe Sanchez. Apparently from the pages of Justice League of America, but that book hasn't actually started yet as of this issue, so sure, we'll roll with it. So we open up with Katana. It looks like she's in Japan, but apparently this is San Francisco, and it's just a small part of San Francisco called Japantown, which, again, we'll get to. But she opens up that she's fighting someone named Coil, who is a master of the Spiral Sword. It looks like a ribbon in everything it's drawn, but apparently it's sharp. So either way, it starts binding her and starts like cutting into her. And the guy Coil, he then says, "Psh, you're so filled with anger and emotion, just like a woman. You should go back to the kitchen." I'm not even kidding. That is page 2. So at that point, Coil has pretty much taken her down. And it's just like, yep, all that anger. Welcome to Japantown, bitch. So then we open up to a few days prior where Katana is arriving in San Francisco. She is here looking for a girl named Shun. so that she can see her body. And as she arrives in Japantown, guy throws like some candy at her. Katana just catches it and throws it back at him. And he's like, oh, sorry, that was entirely by reflex. And he's like, psh, don't be so serious. Oh, humor's a much better weapon. And then she meets up with the lady she's trying to meet up with. Her name is Nori. And she's like, hey, sorry about the drunk guy outside. Are you here to rent the apartment? And she's like, yeah. By the way, it said that in the ad that it was discreet and with extra space. And she's like, well, yes, the main room is light, but the basement is pretty dark. And she's like, well, I prefer the dark. All in all, it's just her basically saying, hey, pay me extra, and I won't tell anybody you're here. Which she does. So now Katana has a place to stay in a basement, and she sets up some, I don't even know how to call it, like, they're all pieces of plywood that she set up projectiles to fire out of. And she flips a switch with her foot, and all of a sudden these projectiles fire at her with paint tips on the end, so she can see if any of them hit her. And she swipes through almost all of them with her eyes closed, but a few of them hit her. And she's like, oof, all right, well, as the kids would say, epic fail. That is an exact quote. So that night she goes to bed and she has a dream/nightmare that she is having sex with her husband who is dead, but the husband then turns into Coil, and she's like, oh no, Coil is having sex with me. And she wakes up and she grabs her sword and says, please forgive me, my husband. It was a nightmare. I didn't mean it. You are the only one who's welcome in my bed. And then she proceeds to get dressed, and she says this whole thing about how housewives in Japan would purposely use everything in a kitchen to be able to fight off intruders, and how every aspect of her body armor, her necklace, her earrings, her everything is also a weapon that can be used. So she makes her way down into, I want to say downtown Japantown, but she specifically says it's only a few blocks. So I guess she just walks the next street over, and she meets up with a woman named Yoko, who is the keeper of Shun. And she's like, oh, nobody wants to see Shun. She's hideous. She's ugly. She's an untouchable. And Katana's like, okay, but I still want to see her. And he's like, all right, fine, whatever. So turns out she has to pay an inordinate amount to see different tattoos that Shun has all over her body. And this is apparently, I'm just going to read it here. Her great-grandfather was dying. His skin carried the story of the stealthy rise and mad decline of the ancient clans of Japan. Shun was a bad girl, and so she was taken on to have those stories transferred to her skin. So at that point, Katana says, I want to see the one about the katana. And turns out it's a story of a madman who had a sword named Soul Taker, the same sword that Katana has. And because he had Soul Taker, he also had blood madness, and he lost his mind trying to purify the clans of Japan. And at that point, Shun's like, hey, can you maybe get me out of here? And then the caretaker says, all right, that's enough, bye, get out. So at that point, Katana makes her way to a park where all the bushes are in the shape of cute little animals, and then she gets jumped by ninjas, and she uses her like earrings and her necklace and her hair chopstick things in order to fight down a bunch of the ninjas, and there are 13 of them, and she does a pretty good job. But then, wouldn't you know it, Coil shows up and he starts using this thing, and then we get back to now where Katana was bound up at the beginning, and apparently the sword squeezed so tight that yes, it cut Katana up, but it pressed against her own sword, the Soul Taker, which is stronger, and therefore it cut through Coil's sword. And she pulls out Soul Taker, starts using it to chop through the ninjas, but it turns out that she's not even in control of her own actions. The sword is moving itself, and Coil's like, hey, is that sword moving itself? And she's like, no, I'm in control of it. And he's like, it looks like your hand is burning. And she's like, I can take it. And he's like, okay, well, here's the thing. You got a magic sword, and we in the Sword Clan can help you control it. Just join our clan. And she's like, I will never join you. You killed my husband. I can hold a burning sword. And he's like, all right, well, you're going to go probably crazy over that, but whatever. This sword will corrupt you. And she's like, I will be able to walk that road. I can do it. And so the issue ends with Coyle saying, "Welcome to the tightrope." Okay. I like the art. The art is very different. Alixe Sanchez has a very different style than I've seen in pretty much any other book in general from DC. I like it. And Nocenti is writing. There are like 4 different things I had issues with. In just terms of like, it's just weird. Let's not forget the epic fail line. Let's not forget the kitchen line. Let's not forget the fact that her nightmare is her having sex with her mortal enemy. And like, there's an odd fascination with not only Katana's naked form in this, but also Shun's. It feels weird. It feels like it's like written by a 1950s guy who has some very big issues with how women are written. But instead it's written by Nocenti, and that, I don't think that makes it better. So, I don't know. I'm not saying it's a bad first issue. It's setting up a thing of, okay, you know, the sword and whatever else. But like, the whole reason she said she came to this town was to see Shun's body. And I'm not quite sure, now that she got that, where are we going? You know? This first issue didn't do a good job of setting up what is the bigger plot. What is going on here? It seems like it's going to be a clan war sort of thing, but considering this is maybe 3 city blocks of San Francisco, it's going to be very limited in scope unless we build it up a lot bigger, a lot quicker. So, yeah, it's got some problems. Overall, I'd say it's like a 6. I still think it's a decent enough first issue. I'm willing to give it the benefit of some doubt. And again, the art, very interesting for the style that it's going for. But, that writing. Please figure out what you're doing and stop doing what you currently are. Batman and Robin number 17, written by Peter Tomasi, art by Patrick Gleason. This is kind of just a one-shot, and I'm sure that next issue we're going to pick up and everything will be totally fine. So, we open up with Batman and Robin coming back from a long night of work, back into the Batcave. They're chowing down on some of Alfred's sandwiches, and he's like, "Oh, well, I'm glad someone appreciates my oatmeal cookies," as we see Titus is just eating them off the table. As Bruce and Alfred start making their way out of the cave, Damian picks up Batman's boot, compares it to his own, and sees how much bigger Batman's shoes are to fill, quite literally. And then they all make their way upstairs, go their separate ways down 3 different hallways, and all turn out the lights to go to sleep. And then we just get 3 different dream sequences. So we open up with Damian's. He's inside a submarine, and outside the window are the drowned, dead bodies of not only Bat villains, but also Red Robin, Red Hood, and his mother. And then a different version of himself comes in to talk to himself, and he's like, "Hey, are you looking at Batman's cowl?" Which is then suddenly filled with Batman's head as well. And he's like, "Yes, it's a reminder that our father has shown both sides of himself, just as we have to him. Remember, you're a Wayne and not a Al Ghul." And then all of a sudden outside the window, a new body drops down, and it's still alive, and it turns out it's Alfred. And Alfred starts screaming and banging on the glass, and one of the Damians looks to the other, and the one Damian's shocked, but the other one looks to him and says, like, "Psh, there's nothing more that any of them can teach us." And then all of a sudden Damian shoots awake, and he looks down at the foot of his bed, and he sees a Robin there. And he's like, "Wow, that's a bit on the nose." And he grabs the Robin and says, "Oh, don't worry, I'm not going to hurt you. Just show me what you want to show me." And he sets the Robin free. And then he hears a bell ringing as he's making his way through the halls chasing the Robin. And he sees Alfred, and he's like, "Alfred, I think that my father's calling for you." He's like, "Actually, he's calling for you, Master Damian." And so Damian follows the Robin along with his dog. They make their way into the library. And inside is Bruce sitting on his chair with a giant bat perched around him, biting his neck. And he says, "Damian, won't you join me?" And then Damian wakes up again, but like for real, I guess. Then we get Alfred's dream, where he's talking to Thomas Wayne, who's got a necklace for Martha, and he's like, "Oh, Master Wayne is beautiful. Do you want me to wrap it for you?" And he's like, "I have the skills of a surgeon." And he's like, "Right. And you can't wrap for shit." And he's like, "Fair enough. Wrap it up, Alfred." And so he goes ahead and he hands that off to his wife. His wife opens it up, and turns out it was the pearl necklace, and they're on their way to the theater that night. So Alfred then sees some bats in the kitchen. He follows them to the fridge, which opens up down into the Batcave. And when he gets down there, Joker is using a hammer to beat the crap out of the Bat family, all of whom have been Jokerized. And Alfred says, "That's quite enough, clown." And Joker's like, "Oh yeah? I'll put down the hammer right between your eyes." And Alfred pulls out a shotgun and blows his head off. And I'm not saying that metaphorically. I'm saying we see Joker without a head. And Alfred's like, "I told you that was enough." And all of a sudden, Alfred shoots awake. He lays his head back down, looking a bit sad. But then when he finally closes his eyes, he smiles. Like, yeah, that was a good dream. And then we get Batman's dream, where he's down in the sewers. And if you remember back in, like, issue, I think it was 1, honestly, Batman made a little paper boat. Here his parents are saying, like, "You can't just build a boat and hope the darkness magically sails away on it." And he's like, "Why not? It's my boat." But as the boat sails down the sewer, we see all of a sudden an explosion coming out of the water. And the sewer floods, and the boat becomes huge. He's trying to bring his parents onto the boat, but he's unable to do so. And then all of a sudden, all the villains are around, and they're saying, "Oh, get the bat, get the bat." And Batman's trying to keep them off of his boat, so that they don't, like, tip it over and cause it to sink. And then from the ocean beneath comes a giant white whale in the shape of the Joker, more or less, and it devours his boat. And so Batman is left into the water. He looks back up at the surface, and he sees Damian reaching his hand through the water to pull Batman up. And then Bruce wakes up. He goes into Damian's room, tucks him into bed a little bit tighter. And then we get one more scene of Damian's dream, and it's him and Batman just going out crime fighting, doing all the things they have been doing over the course of this series. And he says, "All right, another hard day's night is done." And as the sun rises over Gotham, they're sitting on a church cathedral, just eating some food. And Bruce turns to Damian and is like, "You do know this is a dream, right?" And Damian's like, "Yeah, of course, but it's one I don't want to wake up from." And that's the issue. I'm sure that nothing bad will happen to Damian by the next issue, and everything will totally be fine. So, in terms of this one, I like it. We just had that Batman and Robin annual, which was just kind of a little interstitial of, hey, here's just, building their relationship. Here's just a little thing doing that. I think that this is a good of showing everybody's internal space right now. It shows Damian as still being conflicted over his murderous past and whether or not he's actually growing here with Batman, but still wanting to be with Batman. We see Alfred wants to protect his family despite not being entirely suited to do so, and how much he really wants to kill the Joker. And then we see Batman struggling for not a normal life, but just a life where he doesn't have to fight so much, I guess is what it's saying. He's fighting off all these villains, and he feels like he's going under because of it. And Damian's the one thing that's able to pull him back. I think it does a fantastic job of showing all that. It's a nice little interstitial of, yep, here's what everyone's going through right now. Here's just a night in the life. So I'm going to give this one I almost want to say 8, but that does feel... No, I'm going to say 8. I think this is a good issue. This is a nice solid piece of work from both writer and artist. Everything looks great. It's very surreal at times. You can feel how one panel evolves into the next, but it doesn't have any sort of logical standing of like, okay, why was the Batcave in the fridge? But then beyond that, it doesn't really matter because it is all just a dream, and it's set up that from the beginning. So yeah, 8 for this. Really do enjoy it. Batgirl number 17, written by Ray Fawkes, art by Daniel Sampere. So, pretty much a new arc, but we are coming off the heels of Death of the Family. So Batgirl, we open up here, is just surrounded by fire. There's a dead cop in front of her, or at least one who's knocked out. And the narration is seemingly omnipotent. It's saying like, oh, there's Batgirl. The fires of Gotham keep on surging. How long can you endure it? And we see Batgirl is trying to get her bearings, and all of a sudden basically a rocket, an RPG, just fires at her, and she like jumps into it, and the narration's like, oh, she leaps, she dances, and she will never surrender. So then we get 24 hours earlier. Batgirl's still recovering from her wounds from Death of the Family, but she is unwilling to be in the hospital, and she is looking through GCPD mugshots of some guys and trying to figure out which ones were Joker's thugs. And so being able to say like, okay, these guys are extra super dangerous because Joker was around. And she realizes one of them, despite wearing clown makeup, she sees him on the website and is like, oh, that's one of them. And she puts all the guys into a folder, sends it out and saying, hey, these guys are Joker gang members. Several of them are violating their parole. Go get them. So also in between these issues was a story in Young Romance where Batgirl and Ricky sort of kind of had a thing. And Ricky said, hey, maybe you should ask me out if you see me around. Just letting you know that happened, because now Barbara's out on the street and she bumps into Ricky. And Ricky doesn't recognize her, of course, because she's not in her Batgirl outfit. But Barbara's like, oh, hey, Ricky. And he's like, I'm sorry, do I know you? And she's like, your name tag. And he's like, okay, yeah, anyway, I'm working at a soup kitchen right now. Can I help you with something? And she's like, oh, you're being awfully rude. That's not a way to ask any sort of girl out, Ricky. And she's like, what in the world are you talking about? So that happens. Meanwhile, we cut over to the hospital where Barbara's mom is still recovering from her role in Death of the Family. And in walks James Gordon Jr. dressed as a doctor. And he's like, hey, Mom, how you feeling on a scale of 1 to 10? You can use your fingers. Ha, ha, ha. By the way, are you taking antidepressants? How long have you been feeling anxious? I'm very concerned about that. And immediately her mom is just like, no. Get out of here. I ain't dealing with you. You're the worst. I hate you. And she literally says, you know what? I know you think I left because you're so creepy or whatnot, but no. You are so entirely normal in your psychopathy. Like, you're nothing special there. You're just a disappointment. So if you're here to kill me, otherwise get the hell out. And James Gordon Jr. seemingly just takes it on the nose. So then we cut over to Jim Gordon in the police department, and he is looking over the message that he just got from an anonymous source, and he's like, all right, well, we're understaffed and underhanded, but we can at least go out and get these guys. So he puts up the mugshots of people who were used as Joker's accomplices and says, all right, everyone's going to go out here. Harvey Bullock's going to be coordinating, so keep an eye out. And then he talks Harvey off to the side and says, like, by the way, my son's out there. He is like the number one priority. Get him off the streets no matter what you do. And Harvey's like, don't worry, we will get your son in. Just if you need anything, let me know. And we see them all grabbing their shotguns and whatnot, getting ready to roll out. So over in the Gotham City motel, James Gordon Jr. is calling his sister, and Barbara answers, and she's like, hey, what's going on? As we see that there is a house on fire somewhere nearby, and cops are already on the scene, and Barbara's like, oh, James, it's you. What do you want? And James is like, I'm sorry about the whole Joker thing, but it is kind of compelling, that stuff he was saying about cutting off your arms and legs. And she's like, oh, hey, it sounds like you're off your meds. Your voice always gets a little bit squeaky when you do. And she's like, oh, you're being funny. That's nice. I liked it better when you were scared. And we see during this conversation, one of the Joker's goons is being arrested. And Barbara has a police scanner on, and basically James Gordon is saying like, oh yeah, you think you're being funny, you won't be laughing soon. And the police scanner says how the car basically just exploded. The car carrying the Joker goon exploded before it could even get him in there. And Batgirl's like, I was really hoping not to go out tonight, but it seems like I gotta. So she gets her gear on, goes out, and it's like, oh my god, this guy was the Joker goon like a suicide bomber? What's going on? So then we cut to another location with another Joker goon, Cops are at the door. They're ready, locked and loaded. They're going to attack the police as soon as they open up the door. But then, just before then, Batgirl jumps in, starts taking him out. The cops on the other side just hear a round of gunfire. And then when they finally get into the room, they're all in cuffs with guns on the table. And they're like, oh, we didn't do nothing. That Batgirl, she framed us. And at that point, Batgirl was like, okay, they didn't have any suicide bomb stuff on them. So clearly it wasn't suicide bombers. What in the hell caused that car to explode? And as she's looking on, she comes to the realization, like, all of those fires and explosions, they weren't set by Joker's people. They were set by someone else. And we see the RPG coming at the squad car that they were being loaded into. Batgirl manages to get the police kind of out of the way, but they're still impacted by the blast. And then we see James Gordon Jr. looking on from below as Batgirl grapples up to where the source of the RPG was. And as she gets inside the window, there's a dude in like full tactical armor. And he's just like, okay, guess I'm dealing with a bat right now. And as Batgirl starts like punching him, it's just like, oh, okay, whatever. It's always someone in a costume. Who are you even supposed to be? And he's like, oh, they call me Firebug. Guess you should have done your homework. And she's like, what are you even talking about? And he presses a detonator. An explosion comes up behind her, and then Firebug unleashes a flamethrower on her, where we end the issue there. I want this to be more James Gordon Jr. centric. I know it feels like he already made up a majority of the issue, which, to be fair, he did, but like, it seems like we're pivoting into this Firebug thing, and if all of this happens to be James Gordon Jr. plans, I'm okay with it. But it doesn't feel like that quite yet. It still feels like they're still building to Junior in the background, despite the fact that the cover for this issue is Junior literally attacking Batgirl directly. I just want that arc, you know? I feel like we've built to it literally since like the third arc of this book. It's been a long time coming. I just want to get there now. Maybe that's my own personal bias getting in there, but I don't care about Firebug, and they haven't done anything to make me care about Firebug. I just want to see the Junior thing resolve. So, art-wise, this issue's fine. The omnipotent narrator, I feel like it's actually supposed to be Junior, but at the same point, at one point he quotes himself, so I don't know. It's somewhere in the middle. I'm going to give this one it's a 6.5. It's fine. It's not great. I'm wanting something that they've been teasing for so long, and I'm just tired of the tease. I just want to get to it. Threshold number 2, written by Keith Giffen, art by Tom Raney. Last issue we left off with Stealth being visited by Space Ranger, and then a crew of bounty hunters showed up outside her house. If any of that means anything to you, congratulations, you remembered more than I did. So, we open up with a single page of like an I can read now sort of book, like super low level kid reading, of basically explaining how the hunt works, where it's like, see the bad thing run, see the bad thing get shot, or vaporized, or burned. It's messed up, but I love it. So then we get back to the main story where Stealth and Space Ranger are being fired upon, and Stealth's like, what club is it? Like, who's firing on us? And he's like, does it matter? Yes. Okay, it's Crimson Thrust. And she's like, crap. So at that point, she throws out what seems to be a space grenade out there. It takes out most of them, but there are still some snipers nearby. So they make a run for it, and basically it's just a debate back and forth of Stealth and Space Ranger of who's going to be leading who to where. And Stealth is like, okay, you go away for a while, I'll deal with this. And she goes into her weird invisible mode as Space Ranger just like hides in a nearby alley. So then we get Crimson Thrust, who are like, okay, some of our guys are down, they're in bad shape. What's going on with her? What are we going to do? And one of the guys is like, I've studied her. She's as much in the hunt as we are. And it's like, meaning what? It's like, she's going to try to kill us. Like, she's not just going to run. She's actively going to hunt us down as well. And her whole thing is invisibility, but she can't use it while she's moving. So we just got to find her. And then they're like, okay, but like, what if she just waits for us to come to her? And it's like, oh, you think she's suicidal like that? And then all of a sudden we see her little outline. She is got a knife around the one guy's throat, and she just immediately goes around killing all of Crimson Thrust. So then she meets back up with Space Ranger, and she's like, all right, I'm going with you. And he's like, why? And he's like, well, I'm covered in blood, and I'm hoping that wherever you have at least has a shower. And it's like, fair enough. So they make their way out, and then we cut to the host, and I assume one of the producers, and basically they're just talking like, okay, ratings are a little bit in a neutral stance right now. They went up for a little bit when we brought in Jediah Call. Stealth is always a big earner because she's been around for, I guess, 3 seasons. She's the longest lasting one, despite someone named quote-unquote legend or no name, but apparently he's just a myth. And they are also dropping in Blue Beetle, aka Jaime Reyes. At the end of his own book, he was abducted and now he is brought into the games as well. But apparently the Reach, which is what the Blue Beetle is, have a long-standing kill-on-sight order for any Green Lanterns, and since Jediah Call is also a Green Lantern, it could cause extremely widespread damage to the city just between them infighting. And that's what the producer was worried about, but the host is like, it's going to be great, it's going to be hilarious for ratings. So then we cut over to Jaime, who's currently in a holding cell, where they're announcing him being dropped into the game on TV, and 2 of his hosts are like, why isn't he in his armor? He's just a kid. Like, what's going on with that? So at that point, we see Jaime inside his cell, and he's just like, I am pretty much screwed here, aren't I? So then we cut over to a local bar that Jediah has managed to stumble into. And it's kind of like a neutral area. Like, nobody's going to come hunting for him there. He's safe, at least for the moment. But then in walks, I think her name was Amber? I don't know. Regardless, she walks in along with this one guy. And remember, she tried to get him to a place that's like off the grid, into like a resistance sort of thing. And at that point, the guy says like, hey, here's the thing. I'm going to give you some information. And all I ask in return is a favor eventually. And he tells him, like, they're dropping a Blue Beetle, they're dropping a Scarab into the game, and he will hunt you down. Even if your ring's not charged, he can sniff you out like a bloodhound. And he's like, all right, and he's, I guess, thanks, whatever, I'm still not going with you. And he's like, fine, whatever, but you owe me a favor at least. And so Jediah storms out, and the guy's like, yep, it's worthwhile to always have those favors stored up. So I don't think we even get his name at any point in here. They call him Dink, but I think that's used as an insult. Anyway, we cut to the show, and we see that Jaime is being dropped into the game. And the host is like, this guy, he's with the Reach, and we all know how bad the Reach is. We all know how terrible the Scarabs have been. They've been horrible murderers across the galaxy. I really wanted to take away his 1-day grace period. What do you have to say for yourself, Scarab? And Jaime's like, and he's like, your silence is deafening. Anyway, get running. You've got 1 day's grace period. So he goes off running. And then we see that there's a group already watching him, which is made up of an anthropomorphic pig, a woman with some weird fur on her face, and a talking space rabbit named Captain Carrot. This is Captain Carrot. It's capped anyway. So they're looking on. They kind of got like a Guardians of the Galaxy sort of vibe to them, and they're like, "Hey, that's the kid. He's Reach. He's big money or whatnot. So let's go ahead and get him." And it says here, got a stand-in order from the consortium for one of those Reach Scarabs. So I guess they're not doing it for the sake of the game. They're just doing it for some other thing in order to get the Scarab off of them. So Jaime's sitting in the alley basically recounting, hey, if you weren't reading my series, I got teleported to the Reach homeworld, and then they took me off of there and put me on this reality show. Okay? So at that point, Captain Carrot comes in, knocks Jaime out, and was like, cool, all right, we got him. That seems pretty easy. And it's worth noting this entire time he's having arguments with his like crewmates, including the pig one who seems... I don't think he even has a name here. Pig Iron. Great name. Anyway, because they knocked out Jaime, his suit auto-responds, and it apparently starts sleepwalking/sleep shooting them as well. So they start running from Blue Beetle. Meanwhile, we cut to Jediah, who has made his way to a gunrunner's house, and apparently he was the one who sold out Jediah. Yeah, I don't know any of this. His name, I think, was Gorm. So anyway, Jediah goes around, he starts picking up guns. In runs Captain Carrot, and he's like, hey, Jediah, quick question. That whole Reach versus the Green Lanterns thing, is that true? And Jediah's like, why do you want to know? And he's like, no particular reason, as Blue Beetle busts into the room following them. And he's like, hey, it's not my fault. We both knew the same gun runner. We were just here for the guns. We weren't worried about you. So at that point, Captain Carrot starts trying to taunt Blue Beetle into attacking Jediah so that he's able to escape. And he's like, hey, it's better you than me. I did apologize, by the way. So Blue Beetle attacks Jediah. Jediah has some guns that he's using to fire against him. And the very last panel is Blue Beetle making a giant sword and him saying, oh boy, this is going to hurt. So that's that. Here's the thing. I'm not 100% on all the characters yet. I really did have to go back to the first issue and just refamiliarize myself because it didn't do the best job of, like, Jediah is about the only name I had burned into my brain. Stealth, Space Ranger, all the new characters we just introduced, especially Ember and that other guy. I don't know any of them really by heart. So the fact that we were introducing probably twice as many characters as we had in the first issue, I really need you to slow it down because you're getting to like a Legion of Superheroes problem where there's just too many characters and not enough time familiarizing myself with any of them. In general, though, I like the art style of the book. Blue Beetle looks fantastic, just compared to what I've seen him in his own book. I like the art style there, but this bumps it up to this extra like painterly style, and it really is good. Writing-wise, I can tell they have a big story in mind. They've got it all planned out, and I'm interested to see where it goes, but I really need to be more invested in the characters. So hopefully we don't get too many more characters coming in here. I say that knowing full well I'm sure we're going to have at least like 4 more. So yeah, I'm going to give this one a 7. It's just kind of good, not great, but also has a few issues with it as well. Just a nice middle-of-the-road sort of book. So hopefully we can get some sort of just character guide by next issue. Deathstroke number 17, written by Justin Jordan, art by Edgar Salazar. So, last issue was the end of an arc, and this issue is just more of like... The last issue ended with Deathstroke getting an alert that he is apparently being hunted by quote-unquote everybody. What does that mean? Nothing in this issue. So, we're on a train in Japan. There's a business-looking man sitting there, and Slade walks up saying, hello, Tomo. Why are you trying to kill me? And Tomo's like, so you're Deathstroke. You look different without the mask. And then all of a sudden, a katana busts through Deathstroke's seat right next to his head, and we see Tomo attacking him with kunai, and it just turns into a massive ninja fight thing. And Deathstroke's like, hey, alright, so I figured you were honor bound to tell me who hired you to kill me. And apparently he's part of the Tsukesada clan. And he's like, well, we're just going to kill you, and then that's all we're going to do. So, at that point, it's a whole horde of ninjas attacking them, and it turns out that the contract for his death is because Deathstroke killed someone named Jenner Collins, and it's kind of just like an on the event of his death thing. Like, it wasn't anybody else hired, as far as I can tell. So once he gets the name, Deathstroke's like, cool. And he, like, breaks the wrists of Tomo and fights off a bunch of ninjas. But then more ninjas come in, and he's like, okay, I'm not a stupid man. I know that numbers matter, and I am on the downside of that. But I can at least deal with this situation. And as a kunai comes flying at him, he grabs it out of midair, throws it at Tomo. And Tomo's like, oh yes, I'm fast too, but we didn't come unprepared. Even more ninjas! And so they all showed up, and Deathstroke's like, what made you think I'm unprepared? And he clicks a button on his belt, and all of a sudden, the train explodes behind him. And it's right at the junction of 2 cars. So he jumps out, he grabs onto the part of the train that's still going, and all the other ninjas are left on the slowing down part of the train. And it's like, no, it's useless to go after him. We will get him eventually. So then we cut to Tokyo. Later, Tomo is kneeling to his father, saying that he's sorry he let Deathstroke go, and his father's like, oh, but you shouldn't have fallen into his trap. And Tomo's like, it wasn't a trap. He just got the upper hand on us. We're stuck in our old ways. We need to modernize, Dad. And the dad's like, we have survived for 600 years as a clan because we stayed the same. We're going to keep staying the same, damn it. And Tomo's super not cool with that, but his father's like, you're a disappointment, and I wish that you could see it my way. And Tomo's like, oh, I'm sorry, Father, I will find Deathstroke. He's like, no, I will find Deathstroke, because he's already here. And then Deathstroke busts in through the window, and apparently he was tracking him via some radioactive material that was on his fingers or something. And when he busts in, Deathstroke holds a hand to the leader of the Tsukasada clan, and he's like, oh, Deathstroke, you can't kill us. And he's like, no, I'm just telling you to remove the contract. I don't like killing unless I'm being paid for it, but you are being a thorn in my side, which will not stand. And he's like, well, you can't kill us because then we can't fulfill our contract, so therefore ninjas, and all these more ninjas show up behind him, and huge fight, 2-page spread. Not a lot is said, but at that point he gets the upper hand on all the ninjas, and he holds a gun to the Clan Master's head. Clan Master pulls out his own sword. They start fighting, and he impales Deathstroke with the sword. And he's like, well, now hold on a minute. My sword is nth metal. You shouldn't be able to pierce it. That shouldn't happen. You also shouldn't be able to have the speed in order to do so. But regardless, Deathstroke's like, well, you're if you think you're fast enough, fine, but you aren't good enough to beat me. And he pulls the sword from his own stomach while holding his own sword at the Master's neck, and he's like, fine, you've defeated me, take your prize. And he's like, I don't want your head, just cancel the contract, man. That's literally all I'm asking for. And also he admits that he didn't kill Jenner Collins, whoever that is. And the Clan Master's like, why should I believe you? And then Tomo comes up, stabs his father from the back behind, and he's like, because, Father, I did. That's the issue. That's it. That's how it ends. This ends at issue 20. That is the final issue of this. And we set up this whole big thing of, like, his wife and his son were coming out to kill him. And I thought when it got to the end of the last issue, like, oh, good, we're finally dealing with that, because that's going to take 4 issues to deal with. And then we just spent 1 issue on double-page spreads of ninjas. Like, this isn't, like, even the fun version of it, because when this series first started, I was really in on the fun version of Deathstroke, where it was, like, insane stunts and stuff like that. It felt like an action movie on paper. This just feels lazy. This just feels like, okay, yeah, and then more ninjas, right? Because that was literally every page turning. It's like, oh, hey, and more ninjas. It didn't feel like there was a creativeness to it. It just feels like the twist was set into place of Deathstroke didn't kill this guy, and then they had to fill 20 pages to get there. There's literally a double-page spread on this book in the train scene where it's literally just one caption box saying, numbers matter. And that's it. Like, this was padded out, is what I'm trying to say. And it's padded out to something I don't even feel invested in getting to the end of. I want to see the big story that we set up before. Maybe we'll never get there, because I do think that may have been a different writer at that point. I think that might have been when Rob Liefeld was still writing. So, I don't know. It's just a bit disappointing on my end overall. And I mean, you can see how fast I reviewed that in comparison to, like, the standard book length. Nothing happens. It's just void of almost anything. So I got to give this one, like, I'm giving it a 5.5. And the only reason I'm not even bothering with the 6, which is normally what I give it of fine but not great, is just, it doesn't even feel fine. It feels like we're just wasting time to get to the end of the book now. And whatever they want to do with the ending is just going to feel shortchanged. It just feels like you had all this time to do something big, and you decided to just squander it on and ninjas. So, yeah. Nah. Not intrigued, not interested. 5.5. Suicide Squad number 17, written by Adam Glass, art by Henrik Jonsson. So last issue we left off with the team getting a briefing that they're going to attack Red Orchid, aka the sister of Yo-Yo. So we pick up and the attack has already begun. We got Harley, Deadshot, Yo-Yo, King Shark, and Voltaic, the last of whom is pretty much just a shell, like there's nothing going on inside. And we see Yo-Yo being like extremely friendly to the team, like, hey guys, wow, Deadshot sure is grumpy today. And, you know, it's a whole thing of samurais and whatever attacking them all with katanas, and the team's just trying to fight them all off. And Deadshot's trying to ask, like, what package could Waller possibly want from Red Orchid? And Yo-Yo's like, oh, well, it must be something pretty bad to be here in her garden. So Yo-Yo makes the offhand comment to Deadshot of like, hey, I heard you shot Regulus. Shot him dead. I really wish I could have been there to see that. So at that point, Yo-Yo keeps on just like bringing up like, actually, these guys aren't samurai. They're part of Chinese Shaolin tradition. And Deadshot's like, I don't care, Yo-Yo. Can we please just fight these guys and get through them? And he gets a katana to the shoulder, uses it to get close to the guy, blows out through his heads. And then Harley's like, okay, I'm getting kind of bored here. Can we stop dealing with the Shaolin monks and get to the final boss already? And Yo-Yo's like, how about we take this party upstairs? My sister's probably on the penthouse. And Harley's like, I'm just going to quote her here. Keep it up and I might let you suck my toes. To which Yo-Yo replies, the foot fetish thing is that obvious, huh? King Shark responds, you two creep me out, which that's fair. I agree with that. So at that point, they start looking up towards the penthouse, and Yo-Yo then gives his backstory of his sister and him. And it turns out, some time ago in Metropolis, they're on a campus for the university, and Yo-Yo is asking for money from his sister because he fell in bad with some bad guys, and the sister's unwilling to go down to his level, and he manages to follow her into a secure lab because he stole his roommate's badge, name pad, whatever you want to call it. And as they make their way in there, they see that there's a geothermal reactor that is powering all of Metropolis, and that's the project that the sister was working on, but Yo-Yo's taken aback by the whole thing. And she's like, oh yeah, I forgot you're kind of smart. And he's like, oh, I've always been smart. And then she smacks him and says, then why do you have to become a criminal like Dad? And he only did that so he could put food on our table. But then all of a sudden, the lab starts rumbling, and it turns out that this is happening at the exact same time where Metropolis was taken and put into a bottle in Action Comics. So at that point, the geothermal reactor, which apparently has some special elements inside of it, cracks open, and they both get powers. So that's that. Meanwhile, as they're getting up to the penthouse, they're going up the stairs trying to get through all the Shaolin warriors, and then Harley points out, hey, there's an elevator. Let's get in that. So they take the elevator up, which is apparently playing some elevator music of Nirvana, which nobody takes kindly to. And then as the doors open up, they just find more warriors in front of them. So they shut the doors again, but this time the warriors cut the elevator cables. It starts falling. Yo-Yo jumps out of the elevator and manages to grab it. And he's just like, oh, wow, you'd be surprised what new powers you can find out while you're being digested. Isn't that right, King Shark? Ahaha. Anyway, penthouse we go. So they make their way up there, and they make some weird joke about kissing King Shark. But then three young girl warriors a la Kill Bill show up. Literally, one of them has the same weapon as her from Kill Bill. And Harley's like, oh, I can fight these. They seem easy. And as she jumps in, she's immediately knocked back by one of them. And Harley takes her out by just jabbing a pen into her knee and seemingly debilitating her. One of the other ones is attacking Deadshot, and she's like, oh, you're too slow to get past me. And he's like, I wasn't trying to get past you, I'm the distraction. And then King Shark comes up from behind her and eats her. And then one of them is attacking Voltaic, and Yo-Yo's like, watch out, Voltaic, as he's stabbed through the chest with a sword but then he just shocks her full speed and pulls the sword out with no problem. And Yo-Yo's like, are you okay, man? You just got stabbed in the heart and you're just shaking it off. And he doesn't say a word. So at that point, Harley's like, hey, I played enough video games to know that when we beat them, the final boss is right around the corner. Let's see who it is. And then all of a sudden in her head, she gets an internal monologue from Harleen, who I guess is just there as a separate entity now. And Deadshot's like, hey, shake that off. Whatever's going on, we got to deal with this. And then all of a sudden a man is thrown out from the room next door. And it's just like, I assume he is why you came here. And as Harley and Deadshot go to grab the package, Harley gets shot down by some spikes that start poisoning her. And Red Orchid comes out and is just like, welcome home, little brother. And then Deadshot also gets poisoned by some weird gas thing. And Yo-Yo defends King Shark and Voltaic, just like, why is this man so important to you, sister? And he's like, I should ask the same thing of you. But then, as it turns out, the one pulling the strings behind Red Orchid is Regulus. He's back, and he wasn't killed. And Yo-Yo's like, you're supposed to be dead, Regulus. And Regulus is like, same to you, Yo-Yo. That's the issue. Okay, so I don't, in the grand scheme of things, have a problem with anything going on here, except Regulus being alive. I never quite got the appeal of Regulus as a villain. He doesn't quite strike me as interesting, so that part is a little bit of an issue, but, you know, it's an end-of-issue cliffhanger. He might not actually be alive, and if he is, there might be a good reason. I'm not opposed to that. The story as a whole is okay. What's getting me here are these little inner moment details, because some of them I do find genuinely fun, but then some of them I'm like, no, you're crossing a line. For instance, the whole thing with Voltaic just pulling the sword out and Yo-Yo being like, dude, are you cool? I like that. It's a funny little beat, because Voltaic is just completely dead inside. But then there's the layered, like, sucking toes thing. That crosses, I don't know why. In my mind, that just crosses the line of like, no, okay, now we're weird. Now we're in weird. But then King Shark immediately saying like, you two are weird. That's back on the other side for me. It's playing it up. So I don't know. This danced across that line of like funny and just uncomfortable. And I don't know if that's intentional, but it's a weird mixture for me. And I don't know how I feel about it in the end. So, overall, I'm going to give this one... I'm okay with the Yo-Yo backstory as well. And that did make up about 4 pages. So, I'm going to round it up to what I would say is a 7. It's barely a 7. It's more 6.5 than I'm willing to. But I'm willing to say, okay, maybe if your humor is more in line with that, it would bump it up to a 7. I feel like I might just be the odd man out for that. So yeah, for like the 8th time now, that's a 7. And we'll see what more continues on with Red Orchid and or Regulus and or Yo-Yo and or Voltaic next issue. Team 7, number 5, written by Justin Jordan, art by Jesus Merino and Pascal Alixe. So, last issue wrapped up the whole arc of the Black Diamond or whatnot, and Slade Wilson was offered special stuff. So, this issue picks up in the Pacific now. Not like Team 7 now, which was actually then, but like when all the other books are taking place now. And we see this giant-ass ship, and Deathstroke jumps onto it. He takes out some soldiers. He makes his way into a single room where Lynch is, the leader, founder of Team 7. He's like, hi, Deathstroke. Do you want to talk to me about Caitlin Fairchild? So then we go to 5 years ago, where Caitlin Fairchild, the daughter of Alixe Fairchild, is working in a prosthetic center, and there is a woman there who I guess had her arm blown off in some sort of military thing, and she is currently working on a replacement bionic arm. And the lady is amazed by it. She's like, oh my god, it's incredible. I feel like it's actually my hand. I can feel it. You and that Dr. Henshaw over there are doing great work. And then we see Dr. Hank Henshaw working on this stuff, and it's like, yep, our next step is to get you walking again because you're stuck in a wheelchair, but that's going to take some time. Can I talk to Caitlin alone real quick? And so the lady leaves. I think she's important. Her name is Max. Just letting you know in case she comes up later. But at that point, Caitlin's like, oh, thank you so much, Dr. Henshaw. And he's like, you don't actually have to thank me every time we're alone, but, this is your father and Mr. Lynch who are funding this whole thing. And he's like, all right, look, what I need you to do right now is file this actual, paperwork instead of the digital stuff we get. Can you do that? And she's like, oh, of course, anything. And he's like, right, all right. So then he goes into a back, super top secret part of the lab where he needs a retinal scan. And inside is this, as far as I can tell, completely bionic man that is being built from the ground up. And they call it the Spartan Project. And they're working on the biointerface and all that. But apparently it's all going to be used to better understand how to repair soldiers when they come back. And Henshaw says they barely even crack the surface of what he can do as his eyes open up and they're glowing red. So then we go to Slade, who is in the gym working out, and Alex Fairchild comes in like, hey, Slade, you should probably be relaxing like everybody else on the team. Why are you here working out? He's like, why are you in the gym? He's like, I'm in the gym physically, but mentally, I brought beers. So here you go. Here's a beer. And basically the conversation comes down to you're lucky to be alive. You should be spending this time relaxing with your family. Speaking of which, where's your family? And Deathstroke's like, well, he's like, okay, maybe, just maybe, you need to figure out what it is you're doing all this for. I do this for my daughter and my wife, but what are you doing this for, Slade? Because something has to matter to you. So then elsewhere in Team 7 HQ, Dinah is talking to Lynch, basically saying, hey, why did you send us on that clearly suicide mission? And Lynch is like, it wasn't totally a suicide mission. You survived after all. And he shows an image of a North Korean orphanage where apparently it's one of the earliest documented instances of metahuman emergence, where this girl got powers that allowed her to change the geometry of space-time, and in so she turned all of her fellow orphans into Cronenbergian nightmares. And Lynch is like, that's the future. These powers are popping up more and more and more. So many people have them, and we're trying to keep this little Team 7 thing out of the hands of Washington so that they don't get greedy with it. We're doing the right thing here, okay? I do believe in you. It wasn't a suicide mission. I believe you can handle this. So, that's that. Meanwhile, Caitlin, as she's filing the paperwork, a red alert goes off. It says a mimetic entity is detected, and as she looks down the hallway, she sees, as far as I can tell, a cybernetic rabbit with a chainsaw attachment on it, and Caitlin proceeds to throw her clipboard at it and bash its head in. And she's like, okay, well, that's weird. And then she hears Max calling from down the hall saying, Caitlin, I need you, or Caitlin, I need help. And she follows the sound of Max's voice into the super top secret room where Max is inside, seemingly completely transformed into a cyborg. And all she can do is repeat, Caitlin, I need help, Caitlin, I need help, Caitlin, I need help. So then we cut, and there's a few other cyborgs in the room as well. Cut to now again. And Lynch says that Caitlin Fairchild is dead. Which, by the way, if you hadn't been reading Ravagers, she's in that. So clearly something's wrong. But anyway, Deathstroke says, just like you, Lynch, and he fires off a few shots. Lynch stops them with a telekinetic ability, just in midair. And he's like, things have changed. I've got more powers. And he pulls back the gun away from Deathstroke's hand. Deathstroke's like, does anyone on Team 7 not have superhuman abilities? And Lynch is like, there's one or two of them. And basically, Deathstroke's like, you knew I'd come here. Why are we even here? And he's like, do you know where we are? We're in the middle of the Pacific. Do you know what's underneath us? And he's like, but he's dead. And as we go underneath the water, we say, no, did you really think that we could destroy something, someone that killed an entire country? I brought you here, Slade, because he's coming back, as we see a hand extending from underneath the ocean. Okay, so this is definitely a book of two arcs. We finished up the first arc entirely, and the second one's just totally different. I like the idea of there being kind of like a government-sanctioned basilisk, because Basilisk's whole thing is, at least from what I understand in the other books it's been featured in, is basically the idea of, hey, superhumans are going to become a thing, and we need to stop them now. And I like the government-sanctioned idea of like, yes, but how do we do that without the power falling into the wrong hands as well? And Team 7 is kind of the answer to that. I think that's a good concept. Where it's falling apart for me here is it just seems to be a little bit unfocused. For instance, the Caitlin Fairchild thing, I'm sure they have an idea of how it's going to tie in the plot. Justin Jordan's got that planned out. But like, I don't know. The fact that it's just being set up now in what I know to be the final arc of this book, whether he knew it or not by this point, I don't know. It just seems like there was a larger plan here that then had to be immediately cut down because the book got canceled very early on. So I don't blame the writer for that, but the book's quality does suffer because of it. And it does feel like what was probably a much longer drawn out thing has been cut down to what we're seeing here, and it's suffering because of it. So overall, art-wise, this was a very good, solid issue. I don't really have an issue with it. It just feels like a very, not even dense, just very fast-paced. Like, we're just hitting on the beats we need to in order to get to where we gotta go. Like, this issue was like, we've introduced Caitlin Fairchild, we've introduced these cyborgs, we've introduced that they're going to be bad, and we've introduced that in the modern day, something else is going on. So with all that combined, yeah, there's a lot. So I'm going to go ahead and give this one a 6 flat. It's a 6 flat. I know that kind of sounds harsh with what I was just saying about it, but it's got issues. It does have a lot of problems with it. And it's never quite done anything to really grab my attention and think that it's going to be doing anything amazing either. So it is kind of falling because of its previous issues, but I'm trying to stay objective. It's still just a 6 flat. The Ravagers number 9, written by Michael Allen Nelson, art by Ig Guara. So last issue, Rose and Warblade led some dude into a town. He blew up and everyone got infected with radiation. Now they're all blowing up, and Rose and Warblade have to save the day, but then the Ravagers showed up. Anyway, so this issue opens up inside the jail. One of the prisoners is like, hey, let me out of here. My cellmate's going nuts. And the cop just runs out the door as we see the cellmate is like literally about to explode himself. Meanwhile, we cut over to the Ravagers fighting Warblade and Rose, and basically they were looking for Adam, the original guy who blew up, and Rose is like, yeah, he's already dead. We've got our own problem going on here. Can we not fight right now? And then the cop gets involved, and he's like, hey, everyone stop fighting. These two were helping. You guys need to back down now. And immediately they're like, I'm sorry, did you say that Rose and Warblade were helping? And it's just like, yeah, I know. Crazy, right? So at that point, we see the daughter, Candace, steals her dad's cop car and just like, nah, screw this. I'm out. I'm leaving. I don't want to be in this crappy town anymore. And, oh yeah, Rose got infected with the explosion stuff as well. So she's like, yeah, I'm kind of dying, and that's an issue. And then the cop that left the jail said, Sheriff, you got to come quick. The entire jail has been blown apart. So he's being pulled in 3 different directions, either dealing with the irradiated people, dealing with Rose dying because she's one of the people who can help, and then also dealing with his daughter and the jail. So all that stuff coming up, he's just like, okay, here's how this is going to go out. Caitlin and the cop are going to help Rose, Warblade is going to deal with the inmate situation at the jail, and the rest of the Ravagers are going to get his daughter and bring her back. So first we go to the Warblade thing, who goes along with the deputy. And the deputy's just like, you seem like a bad person. I really want you out of here, but you are trying to help, so maybe you could do something. And Warblade's like, oh my god, please shut up. I don't want to hear anything out of your head anymore. And then immediately he's incinerated, and Warblade's like, oh, good, finally, that happened. And we see that the prisoner is able to wield his radiation powers for a while. And Warblade's like, okay, here's the thing. I need to analyze someone, and it seems like you're someone who's not going to be missed. So I'm just going to wait for you to drop dead. And then he keeps on blasting Warblade, and he's like, you should be overwhelmed with pain right now. And the inmate's like, I'm pretty good at handling pain. He's like, all right, well, let's see how long that goes as they start to fight. Then we go to the cop, Rose, and Caitlin. They break into a local clinic, and the cop's like, so, Rose, how much morphine can you handle? She's like, as much as you got. So they just fill her up with that in order to get her mind off the pain and try to figure out how she got infected by this radiation. But Caitlin and Rose have this whole thing about how Caitlin betrayed Rose, and it was like, Caitlin's like, oh, but you betrayed us first because you sold your soul to Harvest. And it's like, no. You were in on that too. You betrayed me. So then we cut over to Caitlin, who's still driving away. Ridge jumps in front of her car, and she slams into a tree, and she's like, Christ, kid, just put on the brakes next time. So she tries to run away from Ridge. Tara throws up some dirt walls in order to stop her, and she's like, no, I can't go back there. Who are you people? And Ridge is like, nah, screw this. I don't want to be here playing babysitting duty. I'm going back into town. I'm going to go deal with Warblade. Thunder apparently is having some head-splitting migraines. And he's like, they're all looking at him like, dude, do you have the radiation thing as well? He's like, no. I've been dealing with this since before we got to town. He's like, okay, why? He's like, I don't know. It's ever since my sister died. My head just hurts like that. Anyway, let's deal with Candace. And Candace is like, well, why don't you just let me go and go get my brother? He's a weirdo like you. And Tara's just, I'm sorry, did you say like us? So then we cut back to Warblade. He's managed to land some hits on the prisoner guy, and he's like, okay, well, let me just analyze the blood I've got on my fingers right now. Okay, cool, done. I don't need you anymore. And he's like, well, I'm not done with you yet. And as he's blasting Warblade, immediately his, entire body just stops, and he doesn't know what's happening, and it turns out that it's actually Candace's brother who brought him and stopped him from attacking. And Warblade's like, hey, did you bring this guy to his knees? And he's like, I don't know, kinda. He's like, cool. Next time, put him in the ground, as Warblade just cuts off his head, and he explodes in his radiation thing. So then the cop arrives, and he's like, oh, what, you brought my son here? And Warblade's like, nah, he just walked over. Screw you. This is not my fault. And the cop starts yelling at his son. He's like, oh, you could have been killed. You could have gotten hurt. And he's like, but then he eventually stops and hugs him. Just like, I'm so worried about you and your sister. And I'm sorry about that. So then Ridge walks in. And he's like, Warblade, I'm going to kick your ass. And Warblade's like, bring it, you cockney bastard. Because apparently, I forgot to mention at some point, he was British. Tara comes in with Candace. And the cop is like, okay, can you guys please just go home so I can just have that bit off my plate? And the kids are like, okay, fair enough. So they start formulating a plan on what to do and whether they can even trust Warblade. But then as Candace is walking away, she starts exploding as well. And the cop's like, oh, God, no, you got to save my kid. Warblade, what do we do? And Warblade's like, okay, I analyzed the stuff. It should be able to dissipate the problem from the entire town, but I need 15 people to go through an intense amount of pain. And he's like, cool, I'll go find some volunteers. So he runs off. He immediately brings back 15 people, and Warblade's like, well, that was fast. You did tell them they would be in intense pain, right? And he's like, yep. And they still volunteered? Yep. Wow, better people than me. Okay. Also, I need one person to be at the center of all this, and they will almost certainly die. And the cop's like, all right, I volunteer. And they're like, no, Dad, don't volunteer. And he's like, I'm your dad. I have to do this to save you, Candace. So they all form a circle, and they're all holding hands with each other, and somehow this is going to fix the problem. And Warblade, he's so happy. He's just like, hey, Caitlin Fairchild, you're going to have to trust me. Ha ha. So at that point, he goes around the circle, and he's like, all right, hold on, just got to figure out the right angle here. And he seemingly just slashes the air, and then all of a sudden there's a giant radiation explosion within the circle. the dad dies and the problem's solved. I don't get it, but it happened. So at that point, everyone is relieved of their radiation sickness, and everyone, Rose and Warblade are like, okay, we did it. Ravagers, are we cool for right now? Like, let's not fight. Let's just, you guys go your way, we'll go ours. And as the Ravagers depart, Rose gives a look to Caitlin like, we could have been friends still, but you had to be a bitch. So then Rose turns to Warblade, and Warblade's like, okay, cool, let's grab the sheriff's kid, because he's got some superpowers, and Harvest is going to want that. And Rose is like, no. We can't let Harvest know we were ever even here, because remember, we're only here because we failed mercilessly. If Harvest ever finds out, he's going to kill us. As we see, Harvest is watching a hologram of them saying those exact words. Oopsie. Okay, so as for the whole story of both arcs, or both issues, I do like the idea of Rose and Warblade being forced in a situation where they're actually forced to do the right thing, like the good thing. I like that as a story arc. The solution, like the fact that Warblade knows how to stop it, I'm okay with. The fact that it doesn't make any sense at all is where I draw a little bit of a problem. Like, how hard would it have been to just tell us? You know? Like, I don't know. That just seems weird to me, where it's like, they purposely threw out some weird math science stuff of like, oh, carry the 6 and divide by the thigh quadrant. And it's like, okay, well, just give us a fake explanation instead of it just being hand-wavy like, and he fixed it. That's the only part that really bothered me. Yeah, no, for the most part, it's just, I think it was a solid little 2-issue arc. This one probably felt a bit more condensed than it needed to, but it's the way they're doing it, so I guess it's fine. Yeah, no real major issues. It didn't blow me away. It was just a good concept of Warblade and Rose having to do the actual right thing, and the Ravagers being on the technically wrong side of it for once. So I'm going to give this one a... I'm going to say 7, and the only thing that bumps it up from like a 6.5 is the fact that I think it had some genuinely good dialogue, especially from Warblade, where he's just like, oh my god, I so don't want to be here. And he's just funny in the way he does it. So, yeah, I'll give it a 7, which is, I think, maybe a series high. Demon Knights number 17, written by Robert Venditti, art by Bernard Chang. So last issue, whole lot of stuff changed, but the big takeaway leaving it was that Horsewoman, Surgiston, and Exoristos were sent by an aged Algebir to take on the army of Cain the Vampire, but first they have to make a pit stop and pick up Jason Blood. So yeah, we open up in Hell, where Etrigan is just sitting bored, and Lucifer comes down being like, hey, if it isn't you dickbag, I'm so happy that you've been sealed back here in Hell, and Jason Blood has not called you up to the surface for God knows how long. If only you know that you'd be stuck here in this sort of limbo for eternity, where I don't want you, but neither do they. And Etrigan's like, hey, I'm playing the long game just as much as you. You aren't the only one. And he's like, yeah, okay, bye. And Lucifer flies away. And then Etrigan's like, Jason! Let me out, Jason! So then we cut back to Vandal Savage's fortress, where he is keeping Jason Blood hostage and has him mystically muted so he can't summon Etrigan. And he's like, hey, Jason, I have dinner here. Do you want to smell it? I'm sure you're super hungry considering you haven't eaten anything in all that time. Oh, well, I'm going to eat this all by myself. Guards, take him back to the dungeon. I'll torture him more tomorrow. And so he is shackled back up. Meanwhile, in Algebir's kingdom, Exoristos and Surgiston are basically just talking about the trek they'll have to make to go get Jason Blood. They know where he is. He's inside of Vandal Savage's fortress, but they also know that the army of Cain is coming down rather quickly, so they'll have to move as fast as possible. Meanwhile, Horsewoman arrives, and she comes up on a newly picked out horse, which is a very stocky, tiny little horse, And Aljabeer's like, oh, I'm sorry, horsewoman. I told them that you could pick from any of my royal steeds. And horsewoman's like, I know, I chose this one. His name is Backwedge. And basically what they said is that horsewoman does not pick a horse for its skill out in the field. He picks them for their personality because she likes talking to them. And Horsewedge was a horse that was next to a mill wheel in the middle of the city. And the stable horses are kind of pompous assholes. And Backwedge is not. And Backwedge literally says, like, you tell him, Sarah. So Exaristos makes fun of the pair of them, saying, like, oh, let me know when the horse dies on you and I'll have to drag you behind my horse. And so Backwedge unshackles Exaristos' saddle when she's not paying attention. And as they all ride off, she falls off her horse. And Horsewoman's like, Backwedge, me and you are going to get together just fine. So we cut back to, I guess, the end of the night. And Exaristos comes to Vandal Savage's door and it's like, hey, Vandal, I heard that you had this castle. I'm tired of going at it alone. Mind if I join your force? And he's like, I don't mind, but you'll have to beat me in strength. And so they just start arm wrestling. Meanwhile, Sir Yiston goes down to the dungeon, takes out the guards, and goes to Jason Blood. He's like, hey, Jason, here to save you. Need you to transform into Etrigan. Takes off Jason's muzzle, sees that he is mystically muted, and Sir Yiston's like, oh, okay, new plan then. So cut back to Exaristos and is arm wrestling Vandal. And Vandal's like, hey, did you know I was torturing Jason Blood? I've been doing it God knows how long, but hey, what does it matter to us? We're both immortal. You should join in tonight. I'm going to come up with all brand new ways to torture him. And Sir Yiston gives the signal that they have Jason, so Exaristos is like, hey, remember how I beat that giant horn thing by headbutting it? And Vandal Savage is like, yes, I do. And then Exaristos headbutts him, knocks him out cold. And we see Jason Blood and Sir Yiston jumping off of a wall as they land on Vanguard, Sir Yiston's Pegasus. So at that point, Vandal gets back up, tells the archer to close the gates. And Horsewoman readies her arrow, takes care of the guy closing the gate so they can still escape. And then basically Sir Yiston has to explain, like, yep, the plan is screwed. We need to escape with Jason as a person. So this is the new plan. Let's get out of here. And Horsewoman telepathically communicates with all the horses in the place saying, like, hey, I'm not asking you not to ride or not to come after us. I'm just asking you to stay where you are. And as Vandal hops on his horse and says, like, ride, the horse just lays down, and Vandal's like, oh, damn you, horsewoman. So they make their way somewhere in Italy. It's a few days later. And they're following a map that Jason marked out. And Sir Yiston kind of gives Exaristos a hard time of like, hey, the vampires are marching towards Themyscira, and you're, like, really protective of that place, but, like, why? They don't want you back. They exiled you. Like, maybe you shouldn't care so much what they think. And she's just like, well, the last time you asked me to choose is when we and you went our separate ways, so maybe just shut up. So anyway, they approach this little village, or this little villa where Jason marked on the map, and it's like, okay, well, what are we here for? And all of a sudden, Jason is hit with some magical energy. And we see a hooded figure down at the villa saying, like, you leave, you're not welcome here. And as the hooded figure sees the other people on the horses, she's like, oh my god, guys, it's me, it's Xanadu. So this entire thing was just in order to get over to Xanadu. And then meanwhile, an update on Kane and his army. They approach Hungary, and they go into the realm of the Bison Riders, and Kane is like, hey, we're looking for some strong guys in order to help us take Themyscira. And they're like, Themyscira is just a fisherman's tale. It doesn't actually exist. He's like, well, I got an Amazon right here, and she's got a lot to say. As the Amazon bites the Bison Riders and leaves only the king there. And the king is like, oh, the Bison Riders don't frighten. We'll show you violence. And Kane is like, here's the thing. There's only enough room only enough room for one king in my army. And he rips off the guy's arms and tells the vampires to go down into the nearby town and bring them a cavalry of Bison Riders, as we see a bunch of vampires jumping down to do that. Okay. I appreciate that Horsewoman is being given a much larger portion of the story here, because I felt like she was always the one that was shortchanged in all the issues leading up to this. I never felt like we got a good grasp on who she is. And yeah, she's an interesting character. I always suspected she was. I was just waiting for them to give a bit more info on. Telepathic with horses, very specific, but interesting nonetheless. She's also, of course, very kind, and I like the whole brick wedge thing going on. By the way, it is brick wedge. I just mispronounced it like 7 times at the beginning. So yeah, no, it's a good issue. I like how Vandal's being turned pretty much into an antagonist. More so than any other ones, because yeah, Vandal Savage is a bad guy. That's just what he's always been. I like how they're finally just like, no, he fully is. Like, screw him. Obviously, Xanadu was going to join back in. I don't think that was any real surprise there. Art-wise, this book is great. I do want to point out that the only issue I had in the whole thing is when everyone is all hooded up and riding on horseback when they're going to Xanadu's place because it's raining, it's kind of hard to tell who's who just based off of visual clues. I had to pick up via the speech as to who's, because at one point when Sir Easton started talking to Exoristas, I couldn't tell if that was Sir Easton or if that was Horsewoman. Eventually I got it, but yeah, that's the only gripe I really have. Overall, this is a great issue. Setting up a new story. I'm always interested in Kane and the vampires, so I'm going to go ahead and give this one I'm going to say 8. I think it's really good. I really do enjoy Demon Knights, and I hope that it goes on for a long, long time and not canceled at issue 23. And that's it. That's all the comics that came out from DC Comics this February 13th, 2013. And I really want to talk to you here. I really want to say words. I have nothing to say, but I want to say something because next week I am not going to be able to say anything. Intro, outro, no little quips or phrases. I'm going to have to be by the books because there are 17 comics coming out next week. 17. I did the math. I actually looked back to see what these comics were priced at, and I did all the behind the scenes stuff, and taking into account inflation, the comics would cost $68 in today's money to buy all of them, which in fairness is about how much I spend on average per week on DC anyway. So DC, you really need to reevaluate your pricing system because it is killing me. Anyway, let's talk about the comics coming out next week. Next week, February 20th, we have issue number 17 of Batwoman, Birds of Prey, Catwoman, Nightwing, Red Hood and the Outlaws, Action Comics, Supergirl, Green Lantern Corps, Green Lantern New Guardians, DC Universe Presents, Justice League, Wonder Woman, and Legion of Superheroes. Additionally, we have issue number 5 of Sword of Sorcery and 2 all-new number 1s in the form of Justice League of America and Justice League of America's Vibe. No, that is not a sex thing. It is a guy named Vibe. They decided a whole book had to be about that guy, and it had to come out the same week. Thank you, Jeff Johns. Okay. Thank you very much for joining me this week. If you have any thoughts on any of the comics coming out this week, any of the hundreds of comics that may be coming out in the future, most of which are next week, or any thoughts on anything at all, go ahead and hit me up on any one of the locations mentioned in the description. We have a Discord, we have a Twitter, we have a Patreon for you high rollers. Go ahead and hit up any of those. But that has been me. Thank you very much for watching, listening, however it is you consume this podcast. Wish me luck in the coming week. And as always, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.